I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can't, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, we'll have to figure this out.
You just need to get the account, host accounts established on your.
Because the record thing is not showing up at the bottom of my.
Yeah, you just need to get that all sorted out.
I do. I just ran out of time. Okay. Four measurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Now we look at this 7-limb prayer, and those of you who may have gone through the guided meditation of the preparatory practices will now see how this 7-limb prayer works with that particular part of the preparatory practices. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends and turn the wheel of dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. As you practice that, the preparatory practices, and you visualize all of this, when you say this prayer, you can very quickly visualize a lot of these things. It can go pretty fast once you have familiarized yourself with it.
This here?
Yeah, that's Kavita.
That's where you share your screen.
I know, and this is all I'm getting. I can't get what's on my screen. See what I'm saying? There's no point right now because I'm not going to share anything else. What I'll do is I'll send what I'm going to talk about today is I've got it in a document, and then I'll send that document in one of the MailChimp emails so that everybody can get it. Oh yeah, one more thing. The mandala offering, visualizing a purified universe of consciousness and form, purified consciousness and form. And we make this as an offering to the Guru Buddha. Zaji perki chukching meto tramri ramling ji nidegyen pati sangye jindu migde Drokunam dakshingla chapasho idam guru ratnamandalakam niryataya. Alrighty. So today's session is about developing our motivation for practicing this condensed Lam Rim overview that I'm sort of putting together for Western students and practitioners, particularly us. So what we're not actually getting into the first. We already got into the first meditation topic, which was the guru's student relationship and relying on a spiritual teacher. And then we did the preparatory practices, which are a foundational practice for all of this, as I'll talk about, and Tsongkhapa talks about. That this is to sort of provide an outline or an overview of what we're going to be doing and the process of it, and our motivation for meditating on the Lam Rim topics. So this is called Developing Our Motivation for Practice, the 3 types of persons and the 3 scopes of the Lam Rim. And this is based on teachings by
Do you want to put it, can you put the how large?
I'm going to do that just later.
Oh, okay, okay.
This is based on teachings by Tsongkhapa in his great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which is in Tibetan is called Lam Rim. And it's also based on Pabanka Rinpoche's teachings in liberation in the palm of your hand, as well as teachings given by Venerable Thupten Chodron in Seattle during the 90s. We're studying and meditating on a condensed overview of the gradual stages of the path to enlightenment, or Lam Rim topics, that were introduced to Tibet in the 11th century by the Indian Buddhist master Atisha, and further developed in the 14th century by the great Tibetan monk, philosopher, and tantric yogi, Tsongkhapa. As we first discussed previously, the root of the entire path is the guru-student relationship, which is the foundation for all the good qualities, the spiritual qualities that we are capable of developing. If we don't cultivate a good relationship with a spiritual teacher and we don't properly rely on that teacher, our progress on the path will be slow and difficult, riddled with wrong views and misconceptions. Secondly, we then discussed how to prepare the mind for meditation on the topics of the Lam Rim with the 6 preparatory practices, which include the essential daily practices of taking refuge, developing bodhicitta, and engaging in the 7 limb practice: prostration, offering, confessing our negative actions and purifying those, rejoicing in our own and others' merits, requesting our gurus to remain until cyclic existence ends, petitioning them to continue teaching the Dharma, and dedicating the merit generated by ourselves and others for the benefit of all sentient beings. In this session, we're focusing on developing our motivation for practicing. When we set out on a spiritual path, it's important to be clear about what is motivating us to do so. Are we looking for happiness in this life only? Are we looking for happiness in our future lives or in an afterlife? Are we looking to get out of the whole repetitive cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death? Are we aspiring for complete enlightenment so that we can benefit all living beings? Our motivation determines the path we take and the outcome that we will achieve. Atisha and Tsongkhapa both talk about the 3 types of persons with 3 different motivations based on their capacity. Among the persons of initial capacity, there are actually 2 types: those who want to achieve happiness in this lifetime only, and those who are intent on achieving happiness in future lifetimes within cyclic existence. However, in the context of the 3 scopes of the Lam Rim, we're speaking of the latter, those persons who do not work very much on behalf of this lifetime, but are earnestly striving to cultivate the causes for attaining a fortunate rebirth in cyclic existence as either a human or as a being with greater attributes and powers in higher realms of existence, such as a god or a demigod, in the god or demigod realm. That's the person of initial capacity. Persons of intermediate capacity develop disenchantment with the continual repetitive cycle of birth and death and cyclic existence that's characterized by ego self-grasping, claiming desire, dissatisfaction, anxiety, delusion, and suffering, and therefore make their goal their own liberation from cyclic existence, and which results in a state of solitary nirvana, meaning the cessation of being caught up in the cycle. That's what nirvana means. It's a cessation of being caught up in this contaminated cycle of existence. Then the third type of person is a person of great capacity. And a person of great capacity under the influence of great compassion, they make the omniscience of enlightened Buddhahood their goal in order to bring an end to all the sufferings of all living beings. This entire path to enlightenment is included within the paths of the 3 types of persons. The stages of the path for the person of great capacity also completely encompass the paths for both the persons of initial and intermediate capacities. These 2 paths of initial and intermediate capacity are parts or branches of the Mahayana path to enlightenment. In this instance, teachers lead us neither to the path of persons of initial capacity who make their goal nothing more than the transient happiness of life and death and cyclic existence, nor to the persons of intermediate capacity who make their goal nothing more than the liberation from cyclic existence for their own sake. Instead, these teachers take some of the paths that are common to these two types of persons and make them prerequisites for leading us to the path of persons of great capacity. In that way, they make them part of the training in the path for persons of great capacity. The motivation and capacity of these three types of persons correspond to the three scopes of the Lam Rim, or gradual path: initial, intermediate, and great. The extent to which we train our minds in these three scopes determines how much of the initial, intermediate, or great essence we will eventually extract. Venerable Rabina Corton gives an appropriate current day analogy for this kind of training in a gradual path that we can easily understand. If we desire to get our postgraduate degree and the benefits that come from it, we must first proceed through the graded or gradual path of education: grade school, middle school, high school, then university and postgraduate levels. If we want to achieve Buddhahood, the utter uprooting of all afflictive emotions and the development to perfection of all positive qualities, we must first develop realizations into the earlier sections of the Lam Rim. If we don't, we won't develop realizations into the later parts. We simply can't develop realizations into such higher parts of the path as great compassion and wisdom, realizing emptiness, as much as we'd like to, because it sounds so nice, unless and until we first achieve the lower parts, such as ethical discipline and renunciation, as boring and dreary as that may sound to us right now. Yet how many of us can say that we've completely achieved ethical discipline or renunciation, or even know precisely what they refer to? We're talking about training the mind in the stages of the path that are shared with the initial and intermediate scopes. We don't mean training the mind in the actual initial and intermediate parts of the path. For example, suppose there are three people from San Antonio traveling west on IH-10. One is going to Los Angeles, one to Phoenix, and one to El Paso. The first person wants to go to Los Angeles, but must share the road part of the way with the other two. The three travelers have different goals in mind. Two of them intend to stop in either Phoenix or El Paso, and the first intends to continue on to Los Angeles. Even though the first person makes stops in El Paso and Phoenix, from the beginning of the trip, that person's focus is always on the goal of getting to Los Angeles. Similarly, in the initial and intermediate scope sections of the Lam Rim, we must focus on achieving Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Developing bodhicitta, the altruistic intention to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, is the actual practice. The initial and intermediate scope parts of the path are preliminaries to developing bodhicitta, like making stops in El Paso and Phoenix on the way to Los Angeles. So some of you may be wondering, if that's the case, wouldn't it just be quicker and more efficient to just teach the great scope from the beginning, like taking a jet to Los Angeles instead of driving the whole way? Are the so-called initial and intermediate scopes really necessary? There are two reasons for discussing all three scopes. Firstly, there are many of us who cannot train our minds in the great scope initially. So we need to practice in stages through the initial and intermediate scopes. This approach is more beneficial for those of us with good, mediocre, or inferior minds. Now, none of us like to think that we may have mediocre or inferior minds, and most of us like to think that our minds are at least better than just good. But we're not simply talking about mere intellectual prowess here. The Buddha's teachings in the great scope such as great compassion and the higher secret tantras, sound very appealing to our self-grasping ego's penchant for exclusivity and being the best. But these higher teachings require a mind that is so flexible, so discriminating, and so insightful that it can completely cut through the concretized appearance of reality that we now experience and take for granted. Some of the world's most accomplished scientific and philosophical minds find these higher teachings of the Buddha both challenging and intriguing when they investigate them seriously. The second reason for discussing all three scopes is that without some familiarity with the earlier parts of the path, we will have absolutely no renunciation at all in our mind streams towards cyclic existence and ego self-grasping. So we need to defeat any egoistic pride we may have about being a Mahayana great vehicle Buddhist or a practitioner of the highest secret tantras. According to Lama Tsongkhapa, the entrance to the Mahayana or great vehicle is solely the awakened mind of bodhicitta. Once the spirit of bodhicitta is produced in your mind stream, it is, as Shantideva says in his engaging in the bodhisattva deeds, quote, the moment helpless beings bound in the prison of cyclic existence develop this spirit of enlightenment, bodhicitta, they are called children of the Buddhas. We enter the Mahayana when we develop bodhicitta. This sets us on the path of a bodhisattva or awakened being. Bodhi means awakened, sattva means being. If we abandon our aspiration and our intention to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, we force ourselves to leave the company of Mahayana practitioners and the bodhisattva path. Therefore, those of us who wish to enter the Mahayana path as laid out in the Lam Rim must develop bodhicitta through our sustained and repeated efforts. The highest authoritative texts that teach the stages of the bodhisattva path are Shantideva's Compendium of Trainings and Engaging in the Bodhisattva Deeds. Shantideva states that you first need to meditate on the benefits of developing bodhicitta. Then you intensify and strengthen your enthusiasm about these benefits from the depths of your heart. He says this must be accompanied with practicing the 7 limbs of prostration, offering, confession/purification, rejoicing, requesting, petitioning, and dedication, along with practicing the 7 limbs, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The previous topic in this series of key practices of the path, preparing the mind for meditation, the 6 preparatory practices in guided meditation form, is intended to help shape our minds precisely for this purpose. Tsongkhapa states that the methods of training presented in these 6 preparatory practices are prerequisites for the development of bodhicitta in the context of the Lam Rim practices for the person of great capacity. So these preparatory practices stay with us the whole way. And the more we do these preparatory practices, the more familiar we are with them, the more the spirit of bodhicitta will begin to grow in us. And the more we will purify our negative karma. In Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, Pabanka Rinpoche says that to develop bodhicitta, which is the actual practice, we need to develop such great compassion that we simply cannot bear others being tormented by suffering, whether they're human, non-human, friend, foe, or stranger. This is the kind of compassion that arises by training in the great scope. But in order to develop this great compassion, we must know exactly how we ourselves are afflicted by suffering. And we must understand that the whole of samsara, or cyclic existence, is by nature suffering. This understanding comes from training in the intermediate scope. But first, we must fear the karmic results of our negative actions that cause us to be reborn in the lower realms of cyclic existence. For without this fear, we will have no renunciation of temporary human happiness in cyclic existence or the temporary happiness of higher realms in cyclic existence. This motivation and understanding comes through training in the initial scope. We must therefore train our minds in the initial and intermediate scope parts of the path in order to have realizations in the great scope. Bhavanka Rinpoche says this kind of training is like constructing the foundations and wall supports of a house. Venerable Thupten Chodron teaches that it's important to understand these three levels of motivation, because within them is contained all the teachings of the Buddha. If we understand these three levels of motivation and the different practices that are associated with them, then whenever we hear any teaching by any teacher of any tradition, Buddhist tradition, we'll know where it fits into the gradual path. This will remove a lot of the confusion we often have in practicing the Dharma. Venerable Thupten says these three levels of motivation progressively expand our minds. Often we're initially motivated to come to Buddhist teachings because we have some sort of problem, or we're unhappy, or we feel like there must be something more that will help us quickly solve whatever problems we're trying to deal with. This initial motivation is basically concerned with our own happiness now, because most of us want to be happy now. We're not thinking we want to be happy 5 or 10 or 1,000 lifetimes from now. It's nice if other people are happy, but usually we come to a Buddhist teaching because we're looking to be happy ourselves immediately. That's our basic motivation. So here's the first level. Training our mind in the stages in common with a person of initial motivation. As we start practicing the initial scope parts of the path, we begin to expand that motivation of, I just want to be happy for myself now, right now. We begin to look ahead in our life and realize that this human life of ours is impermanent. It will come to an end. Death is certain, it's inevitable, it's something that will definitely come. We start thinking about impermanence and what is going to happen to us after we die. According to the Buddha, death is not the end of our existence. There is something that continues. What happens to us at that point? We begin to become concerned about dying peacefully and making a smooth transition to a fortunate rebirth as a human in which we can continue to practice the Dharma. We don't want to be born as a dog or a cat, even though they're really cute, and it probably might be a fun life if we have a good owner. And we don't want to be born as some other kind of being that lacks the motivation or the capability to practice the Dharma and comprehend the Buddhist teachings. A dog and a cat can't do that. Basically, the best situation we could be in is either to have a human life like we have, or to have been reborn into some pure land where the whole thing is about practicing the Dharma. So we need to have a pretty long view about this. I mean, we can't think, in 3 weeks' time, I shall become enlightened. It's just, it won't happen that way. The method for doing this, to get a fortunate human rebirth specifically, is to practice ethical discipline and observe the laws of karma. That is the method. And of course, if you look at the preparatory practices, all of that is in there, and it goes through it in great detail. So it helps us quite a bit in our studying of the Lam Rim and practicing the Lam Rim. So we start with this ethical discipline part by abandoning destructive non-virtuous actions and putting our energy into constructive virtuous actions, because we're beginning to understand that our actions of body, speech, and mind create the causes for who we are and what we're going to become. Now we go to the second level, which is training our mind in the stages in common with a person of intermediate motivation. When we start practicing the intermediate scope parts of the path, we begin to understand that even though we may create the causes for a fortunate human rebirth and cyclic existence, we're still going to have problems. We're still going to get old and sick and die all over again. We're still going to be confused, get angry, have attachment and jealousy, and we're still not going to get everything we want. If we're still going to have all these difficulties, what's the point in doing it over and over? So out of compassion for ourselves, we turn away from and renounce cyclic existence. You know, we renounce having the kind of life that's caught up in a recurring cycle of death and rebirth under the control of delusion and karma and fraught with suffering, no matter what realm of cyclic existence we experience or that we're born into. We generate the determination to be free from it all. We aspire for liberation from cyclic existence. The result of liberation is nirvana, which is cessation of being under the control of our ignorance, our afflictive emotions and karma, and all the consequences of having to experience the inevitable suffering of compulsive and continual rebirths in cyclic existence. We expand our motivation from having a fortunate human rebirth in cyclic existence to achieving liberation from cyclic existence and reaching the state of nirvana for ourselves. The method to attain this is called the 3 higher trainings. The higher training in ethics, which we already started to practice in the initial scope. The higher training in concentration, this is the meditation, concentration meditation, which enables us to control our mind and subdue our gross desires. And the higher training in wisdom, which culminates in our experiencing a direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness and the dependently arising nature of reality. This completely removes the ignorance that is at the root of all our afflictive emotions and destructive karma. So as you can see, the second level is, I mean, pretty amazing. There's a big shift from the initial scope to the intermediate scope. And you can see, you can't get to this second scope unless you've started with the initial scope. There's just no way, we can't do it. So then we really get into an area where it's super important to be training in these, the paths that are shared by the initial and intermediate scope. Now we go to the third level, which is training our mind in the stages that are in common with a person of great motivation. In the second level of motivation, the intermediate level, we clearly see the situation we become trapped in through the force of our own ignorance and karma, and we develop compassion for ourselves. Because of this great self-compassion, we make the determination to be free from cyclic existence forever. With the third and highest level of motivation, we expand our motivation again. Instead of being happy with the self-complacent, peaceful state of our own liberation, we become keenly aware that we exist within a dependently arising system of countless interacting consciousnesses and forms under the influence of related forces in an interdependent, interconnected, infinite, universal experience. We do not exist separately and independently from others, and they do not exist separately and independently from us. Throughout beginningless time, we have been incredibly dependent on them, and they have been unbelievably kind and generous to us. Each one of them wants happiness just as we do, and they want to avoid suffering as much as we do. So to just pursue our own spiritual path with the attitude of bettering our own rebirth or attaining our own liberation in solitary nirvana simply doesn't make sense in the light of the dependently arising nature of all existing consciousnesses and forms. Having recognized our own suffering and its causes, we now can recognize others' suffering and its causes. Having understood the depth of our own experience of suffering, we now understand the depth of others' experience of suffering. Having generated great compassion for ourselves, we are now able to generate great compassion for others. Our awareness of others' suffering and distress, combined with a desire to alleviate it, is not superficial and unstable because it's firmly grounded in our own experience. Our love and compassion for all others is now actual, stable, sustainable, and courageous. We can only get there by going through these previous levels. We cannot jump to this. We cannot jump to this level, even though it sounds like, oh, I just want to have great compassion and lead everybody to, happiness. We can't do it because we actually haven't analyzed and looked at our own suffering, and we haven't really developed great compassion for ourselves. We have to do that first in order to be able to do it for others. It's like, what's the analogy? You put on your air mask in the plane before you help, the child sitting next to you. You have to do that.
When she was here, and Christian said this in his own way, that you might think you're developing bodhicitta, but without renunciation, you can't.
Yeah, without renunciation.
It is completely impossible.
It will be bodhicitta in name only, really.
It will just be some kind of sentimental attachment-based.
Yeah.
Attachment-based working out, acts of kindness, but underlying it in a subtle way, there's attachment. Like a mother who, mainly only does stuff for their
own child, yeah.
That type of attachment, it's subtle, but it's not the pure, without renunciation.
Yeah.
You aren't really practicing Buddhism without renunciation.
Yeah.
The whole, and Geshe-Nima, in one of his emails in the last week or two, we were talking about the topics he'll be teaching, and he elaborated a little bit on what Christopher was saying that Tsongkhapa had mentioned about it's like building a building, and he talked about renunciation, and he talked about the three principal aspects of the path. This was in context of the requirements before one even begins to discuss the higher practices, because you wouldn't have a foundation to even work from. So the basic base foundation is to sincerely and really be ready to quit ego self-grasping that is the pernicious and persistent cause of our compulsive rebirths.
Yeah, that's why they all say, Tsongkhapa, Pabanka Rinpoche, Shantideva, they all say that bodhicitta, this awakened mind that wants to benefit all sentient beings so that they become enlightened to do that, that is the actual practice.
Just a little bit more on renunciation. So if it's again, I'm just going to re-emphasize this because, again, your bodhicitta won't be authentic without renunciation. And I just want to mention that it's important to know, well, what are the practices I do? What am I supposed to do to develop renunciation? And I'll just simply say that one of the things that they do in the monastery is they do analytical meditation about the things that we have attachments to or cravings for: food, sex, cars, jewelry, handbags. And you have a little, until you begin to, most of us are old enough now to know that when we get a new car, it will get a scratch, it will develop car problems, and it is not going to bring you happiness. In general, what we find the more valuable the thing is, the more suffering it brings us. So, I mean, those are the types of analytical meditations. If the monks are taught that if they find themselves attracted in a sexual way to a body, that they're to think about the blood and the pus and what is actually in the interior of the body and
All of
the
it.
excrement and everything, and so on and so forth. So there are actually practices to do. If you're not sure, well, do I have renunciation? I mean, and this has been a long, do I have any renunciation? Oh, that's really an important thing to be spending some time thinking about, because if we're still running after reputation, name, fame, and so forth, and thinking that we're going to somehow nail it down and get the perfect situation that we want, the perfect car, the perfect house, the perfect whatever, then those are things to analyze. I really just want to mention that. It had come up in a message from Geshe Nima, I guess last week when we were discussing topics.
Yeah, well, Geshe Dragpa also stressed the importance of renunciation, and that's the whole. That's the level, the second level of the path here is renunciation. We can't go much further until we can do that.
Well, I mean, if you look at it from the point of view of the three principal aspects of the path, it is the first level. The first thing you do is develop renunciation.
The three principal aspects of the path. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I think none of us are really practicing Buddhism until we are sincerely and deeply and intellectually clear about the fact that we are tired of compulsive reincarnations, and that we are tired of running after worldly, what do I say, the joys of cyclic existence. We're tired of being disappointed by the relentless disappointments of running after and working and striving. So, I mean, yeah, but I think each of us would be, I mean, I'm constantly doing it now because doing these kind of analytical meditations, because it is the foundation. It really is. You wouldn't even authentically do the 6 preparatory practices if you didn't have renunciation. You might be just going through the motions because it's cool to be a Buddhist. I mean, that can happen. I got to be something. Well, I guess I'd rather be a Buddhist because I think, whatever my other faith was stupid. Well,
that does happen. And that is part of what we actually have to go through. We have to sort of go over this again and again and again and again. And over the years, really over the years, I mean, what it's been now?
Not that many in a way.
15 years, 18 years, I don't know. Over the years, as you keep coming back to these topics, your understanding of them gets deeper, and the importance of them for you becomes deeper. Even some of the ones that don't seem so important, or that we don't really want to look at, like, oh, I don't want to look at the whole thing about hell realms and having a lower rebirth. It becomes more real as we sort of go through all of the levels and have a working kind of understanding of what is emptiness, what is dependent arising, what is bodhicitta exactly, what is the nature of reality, and what is this appearance that we're having. I mean, it's over time, the confidence for me in the Buddhist path keeps building, and it keeps kind of unfolding like layers, or little mini realizations keep happening, but that takes, what does it take? First of all, I think it takes a real enthusiasm about this, about what this is, what the Buddha is talking about, to have a real enthusiasm about it, so that with that enthusiasm, then we will make some kind of effort, some kind of sustained effort, because we can see there's something that's really being triggered in us, and that could just be coming from some past life experience. It could very well be that over many lifetimes, The reason that we're all sitting here now discussing this is that we have very, very slowly and gradually come to this sort of view, and we are continuing on it. So, really, the only moment that we have, the only time that we have is the present moment. So we should sort of get out of our, they say take the long view, right? But in the end, when we achieve Buddhahood, it will be in the present moment, just as we're in the present moment now. So to think how long it's going to take shouldn't discourage us. We should just see it as a process and an experience of growth and progress for ourselves and ultimately for others. So where was I? Okay, so we're in the person of great motivation. So when we recognize our own suffering and its causes, we can recognize others. We can have compassion for them and understanding for them. It's more than just, oh, isn't that too bad? It's I know exactly what they're feeling. I really understand this, and I want to help. So our love and compassion for others, not like it is now. Our compassion now is actually not very stable. As soon as, we can think we have compassion for somebody, but as soon as they do something that pisses us off or that we don't like, the compassion kind of goes out the window, and then anger arises. It's not stable. But at this level, it is stable. So that's something to think about. That's something to, as we go through these levels and analyze and meditate on what they're talking about, we sort of gauge, well, where am I at in relation to this? Where am I actually at? What level am I at? Or, where's my strongest inclination or predisposition? And we can find it as we go through all of this. And we know what we have to work on the most. So now, in this third level, we actually generate the altruistic intention of the third level motivation, wanting others to be free from all suffering and confusion. So we develop a very strong altruistic intention to become a Buddha, so that we'll be best able to lead others to lasting happiness. The method we practice to do that is called the 6 perfections, or in Sanskrit, is called the 6 paramitas. Sometimes it's translated as the 6 far-reaching attitudes. When we say that opening prayer, I go for refuge and shine my light to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha through the positive potential I create by practicing generosity and the other far-reaching attitudes. That's what it's talking about. It's talking about this practice in the highest level and the highest motivation is this perfecting. What we're doing is we're perfecting our generosity. We're perfecting our ethical discipline. We're perfecting patience. We're perfecting our patience. We're perfecting our wisdom. We're perfecting our meditative concentration. It's a process. We have to first understand what they are, where we're at with it, and then we work gradually, like chipping away to perfect it. The perfection comes when we actually, are a Buddha. So we shouldn't think that, oh, I will perfect this, next year. It's maybe that's possible, but I know for me, it's not. I have to keep going back over it and understanding it, and it sort of, the meaning of it opens up for me. So when we look, and then after we've completed the 6 perfections, the actual process, if you want to call it, I don't know what you call it, the energetic process of transforming into a Buddha is achieved through the path of Tantra. And that's not talked about in the actual Lam Rim. It is a practice that your guru goes over with you. It's more private. It's more, His Holiness gives huge tantric initiations in to crowds of 25,000 people. But when you actually get down into the details of Tantra and what is actually going on and what you're doing, what's going on with your energetic body and your physical body and all of this kind of stuff, you actually need a teacher, a tantric teacher who's working with you one-on-one, or maybe one-on-two. Because Geshe Drapa did a lot of this with Kavita and I. And still, I feel like a total, like I'm not even there yet. You know, I'm just sort of familiarizing myself with the general basic process of Tantra. It's impossible because I haven't achieved the first level of this Lam Rim. So,
I mean, I think all of us have attended a medicine Buddha with Geshe Sopa or Geshe Yeshi. I mean, all it is, you know, involves a lot of visualization.
Pabanka Rinpoche says something really
I
funny.
mean, a lot of visualization, and then deeper into it, you get. I mean, basically, you know.
Let me see what.
I just want to leave it hanging there. Something.
There's something that Pabanka Rinpoche said, which is so true. I've experienced it myself. I've seen it. I've done it. He says we have to be farsighted about what we're doing. He says we'll say our contemplations are achieving nothing. And this guy called Geshe Kamaba says, well, why do you think that is? Don't lie. You are distracted in the daytime and fall asleep at night. So we keep ourselves busy all day with our busy life. And then we go to sleep at night. And then we sort of, in a sort of a, maybe once or twice a week or something, we will, or, read a little Dharma or practice a little, or maybe we'll do a little bit of meditation in the morning, something like that. But he's saying it's very unrealistic to feel that we haven't developed realizations after, meditating on this topic. He says we don't make determined practice our starting point, yet we roll our eyes into the top of our head and hold our hands, and we pretend to meditate when we do just one recitation of the foundation of For All Good Qualities. And I had to laugh because that is so true. We'll get all, the foundation of all good qualities, and yet, it's just here and gone, and we're not actually, the integration of that takes time. I'm not saying we're not actually doing it. We are doing it, but it takes time. The point is we have to be very farsighted, have a very long view of this process, and not become disheartened because I haven't had any realizations yet, and it's been 15 years. We have all the time in cyclic existence that exists. So that shouldn't get us down. But I did have to laugh at that because I've done that myself and I've seen it. So when we look at these three levels of practice, according to the three levels of motivation, that all the teachings of the Buddha, we see that all the teachings of the Buddha are contained in them. All the teachings of all the different Buddhist traditions, like Theravada or Zen, they're contained within this framework of the three levels of persons and their motivation, and the methods that one practices to attain the goals that one is aspiring for at each level of motivation. When we understand this, we will never criticize any other Buddhist traditions. We'll appreciate that different people have different levels of spiritual aspiration at any given moment. We might have one kind of aspiration, our friend might have another. I've experienced this. That's okay. We understand that the process of the Buddhist path is sequential and expansive. As we practice the Lam Rim topics sequentially, we keep the final higher practices as our aspiration and goal. It's like we're going to Los Angeles, we're going to Los Angeles. We keep that as our goal in the background. That's why we meditate on a different Lam Rim subject each day, if possible, starting at the beginning, relying on the Guru, the precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, unfortunate rebirths, taking refuge, karma, Four Noble Truths, and so on. We do each meditation in sequence and then come back and start again. We keep doing this in a cyclical manner. This can be very helpful. What happens is we will have an overall view because we've done a little bit of meditation on all of the stages. We see how they all fit together, where they fit together. We also see that the more we understand the higher practices, when we come back to meditating on the earlier practices, for example, the importance of having a spiritual teacher or the precious human life, the better we'll understand them. There will be more depth of understanding there. Yeah. So it helps us build a foundation. And the more we understand the beginning ones, the precious human life, the four Noble Truths, karma, the more we understand those beginning ones, the more it helps build the foundation for the later ones. Because that's what it is. It's like, as Banka Rinpoche said, it's like building the foundations and walls for the higher scope. The more we understand the later ones, the more it enriches our understanding of the beginning ones. This takes time. We need to put some effort into thinking about all these Lam Rim topics. Nobody else is going to do it for us. We have to put in the effort to familiarize ourselves with them. All the highly realized beings attained their realizations on the basis that they put in sustained effort. On the basis that they had a precious human life. That's the basis. We have a precious human life right now as well. The only difference between us and them is that they put in the effort. It's basically a matter of putting our energy into it. We do, as we discussed, we do that for worldly things. We put a lot of energy into our worldly goals and aspirations. If we have energy for those, certainly we should be able to do the same for spiritual things. Because when we put our energy into the benefits that we can derive from worldly things, all that benefit disappears when we die. But if we put the same effort into our spiritual practice, the benefit doesn't appear when we die, it continues on. We carry it with us in our mind stream. So as a closing, as Geshe Nima wrote in his recent message to all of us, what he said is, my heartfelt request, please study well as practice well. Only studying is not enough if we need to change our mind. If study and practice can go together on a daily basis, the more hope there is to change our physical behavior as well as our way of thinking, which support us in becoming convinced of the Dharma's values for this life and all the lifetimes to come until Buddhahood. And that was his message. So I would say studying is absolutely, it's important. We have to get the info. We have to have a conception of what it is we're trying to do. But unless we familiarize ourselves with this, and that's what the meaning of meditation is. In Tibetan, it's called gom, and it simply means familiarize. Meditation is familiarizing with something. And so the only way we familiarize something is we repeatedly do it. We repeatedly practice it. And as we repeatedly practice, just like any skill, we get better and better and better, and we get stronger and we grow more and we become more expert at that thing that we familiarize ourselves with on a regular basis. It's exactly the same for anything we do. I mean, even negative actions, the more we do them, the more we familiarize ourselves with them, the better we get. The better we get at being angry, the better we get at being attached. It gets stronger and stronger. That's simply the way it is. And that's simply what practice means and meditation means. It means familiarizing. And of course, there are techniques which we have discussed and will continue to, and they're very helpful. But the main point is that we have to do it. We have to somehow find the energy and find the little bit of time to do it. So for instance, like in these preparatory practices, which if you've listened to the whole guided meditation, it's like about an hour and a half. Well, that becomes, it's okay to do that once in a while, but that becomes too much over a sustained daily basis. So the way you can do it is, once you're familiar with it, you can cut out all the beginning parts, and you could just go to, after the posture, and you could just go to, like, one day you could just do the breathing, visualizing the Buddha, the consciousness of the Buddha in front of you, and connecting with the Buddha with your breath in front of your altar for 5 minutes. And that is going to have a very positive effect over time. That is going to, you will build on that kind of relationship that you are developing with the presence of a Buddha in your life. And when you start to think of then you could just one day do simply the refuge practice, the refuge in generating bodhicitta, where you see the Buddha as your guru. So your guru is in the form of the Buddha, and you're taking refuge. And this guru, your guru, let's say in this, for instance, say it was Geshe Nima, you would see Geshe Nima, but the Geshe Nima would look like the Buddha. You would know it's Geshe Nima, but you're visualizing Geshe Nima as the Buddha. So you are making that connection between your teacher and an enlightened being. And in your teacher, especially somebody like Geshe Nima or Geshe Drapa or Geshe Sopa, they have this lineage. They do go back all the way to Shakyamuni Buddha, from teacher to student, teacher to student. So it's when you think of it in those terms, you can sort of visualize or feel the connection that, say, Geshe Nima has with the historic Buddha, with the Buddha, and you sort of merge those two together. And Geshe Nima as the Buddha represents the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha all in one being. And then you visualize all sentient beings around you are taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. You could just do that. You could do that just for, I don't know how long that takes, maybe 10 minutes. You could do that 10 minutes every day for a week. You don't have to do the whole thing. The point is, it's sort of like the Lam Rim with these preparatory practices. You want to sort of familiarize yourself with all the different steps of it. And you can't, if you can't do it all in one chunk, then do it in little chunks that work for you, or that you feel attracted to doing. Maybe you want to just sit and do the 9 breath exercise for a week, and that's not going to take very long, but it will be beneficial. So that would be my suggestion in trying to practice these, to do these preparatory practices, because both Shantideva and Tsongkhapa, and basically all of the gurus, say that it's essential. It's essential to do it in order to develop our bodhicitta, and to have an overview of how our mind should be when we approach these meditation topics. So what I will be doing is, I have what we did today as a PDF. I'll be sending that. I'll also make, for each of these, because this is going to be condensed, what I'm doing is I'm taking Tsongkhapa's Foundation of All Good Qualities, which is like a condensed Lam Rim. And I'm taking the main points that he's talking about and doing one session for each of them, if at all possible, so that it's not going to be overwhelming like a big thick book. It will just be something that we could do over and over again. I'll make recordings of them, so if we just want to listen to it and have it sink in that way, there'll be printed sheets of all of this stuff as well, so that we'll have a condensed version. Doesn't mean we shouldn't go to the big thick books and go into all the detail. Yes, we should, but it's helpful to have something that's quicker and more condensed, and that has been put into a way that's not so culturally foreign to us, but is culturally, it's a Western way of looking at things. But I'm not changing any of the meanings of what they're talking about. That's why I like the Venerable Ravina talks about this, the importance of having Western teachers for Western students. She's a great example, because I mean, she just totally understands what we all go through. I mean, she's she's sharp and she can be abrasive, but she's great and she's helpful, and she really cuts through the crap and gets right to the point. And sometimes when the Tibetan teachers are talking about it, we all kind of get lost in what they're saying and their accent, how they put things, the traditional way that they talk about it. And so Rabina says, and people like Tupten Chudran also, I think she's great. They talk about Alexander Berzin, another one, he's really great. They talk about the importance of Western teachers for Western students, Western teachers who are qualified, who have actually studied with the authentic Tibetan gurus. It's very helpful. I have found it very helpful. So that is basically it. Any more discussion or any kind of question about this process and the motivations and the Lam Rim itself?
I think you did a really good job, like just painting the picture, just kind of putting it in its concise form, to know the steps, like you said, we can't get to California unless we drive through, El Paso.
Oh, yeah. I
We get there without going through other places first, and we have to do the process.
Yeah. That's actually, I mean, that's an example that actually they all give. Tsongkhapa gives that example. They just don't use Los Angeles, El Paso, and whatever it was, Phoenix. They use some place in Tibet that we wouldn't have a concept of. So that's kind of like what a Western teacher would do. They would make it appropriate for the audience, and I have always found that to be helpful. But what I'm doing is, I've got liberation in the palm of your hand here. I've got the Lam Rim Chenmo. I look at Venerable Tupten's stuff. I look at Venerable Rabina's stuff, and then I try and put it all together in each of these meditations, if you want to put it that way. Yeah. Okay. So we can all do the dedication prayers. I'm not going to share them, but I'll just say them in English. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. So here, this is talking about the actual practice of bodhicitta. And we're making this aspiration that it arises and it grows. This bodhicitta arises and grows in us, and it does not decline, but keeps increasing. That's what this prayer is about. Then the next one is, may the view of emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. So emptiness is this huge thing. And the more we learn about emptiness, the more amazing it is. The more we understand that the solid appearance that we're all experiencing right now, we're in our room, we have our computer, all this stuff, that is simply an appearance, and it's simply an appearance that's occurring because we have a particular set of sensory vehicle that picks up a particular kind of frequency, and we have a particular belief about things, and that belief generates the world of appearances that we find ourselves in and concretizes it for us, so it seems real to us. But as you get into emptiness, you understand that there is nothing that is like that at all. Nothing. Not even the Buddha. The Buddha is a form and an appearance with a consciousness based on a particular view and aspiration and intention, just as we are, So it's It's trippy. So, you know, we want this view of emptiness. We want this view of the actual nature of how the self exists, how phenomena exists. We want it to arise. We want it to grow, and any part of it that we kind of understand, we don't want that to decline. We want that to keep increasing. So that's what these 2 dedication prayers are about. And, you know, I would probably, personally, I would add to that, may this be the case for all sentient beings. May it arise in all sentient beings' minds, you know, this desire to become enlightened for all beings' benefits. May this view of the actual nature of reality, may this arise in all other beings. Wouldn't that be wonderful, you know? I mean, it would, because it would cut through all of the crap that we experience on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I want to just draw everyone's attention to the chat box so that you can,
Okay.
Geshe Nima on the 10th sent this message to me on, he uses Telegram sometimes to send messages. And I just thought he would like to, I think it's important that everybody is aware of this. I meant to tell you about this when you sent that email the other day.
Okay, well, I'll just read it so we all, you know, are getting it at the same time. Dear students, I'm very happy to inform you that I will conclude my 1-year highly honored position as disciplinarian of Great Monastery for 1 year on next Saturday and moving back to my old room in the next week. Everything went successfully and smoothly. I am much grateful and indebted for your supports, both mentally and physically. I cherish them all the years to come. After my Geshe Larampa ceremony in 2015, I have got 2 times golden opportunities serving the monastery in the field of education so far. First one is school principal and second one is disciplinarian. I dedicate all my merits and virtues for your good health and shining success in all your endeavors. This is to all of us. With thanks and pure dedication, yours truly, Geshe Lobsang Mima. So yeah, dedicating the merit. We should try and make that a practice of ours. I mean, that's in the preparatory practice when we dedicate the merit. We'd not only dedicate our own, but we dedicate any merits from anybody else that's out there. Dedicate it to you know, the enlightenment, happiness of all. Yeah. Okay, folks.
Thanks.
So the thing is that my goal is to now do this every week until Geshe Nima arrives. If I can't, I'll let you know.
We've got a lot going on at the house, so we understand.
Let's just say that his wife has.
Her smoke is about to come out of her ears.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. He really needs time. He's putting in a lot of time.
Here's what it did. I read at night during the week, a lot of time, and then on Friday night I started working on this, and I worked all day Saturday, and I worked into Saturday night and this morning to do this. So that's the lot of time we're talking about, and that's you know, and I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's as important, and I want to do this for Geshe Nima, and I want to do it for us, and I want to do it for myself. So I'm doing it.
Well,
I mean, worldly things will always take up our time. You know,
right.
they'll always take up our time.
We'll dedicate all your efforts to the Great Enlightenment.
There you go. You go ahead and dedicate them too, okay? Dedicate my efforts to the Great Enlightenment.
I will. I'll dedicate yours and everyone's. Everyone's.
There you go. Okay.
See you all later. Have a good
Nice
day.
seeing you all. Hope to see you.
Thank you, Christopher.
In person. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Vida. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.